Spaceplex Family Entertainment Center is a special place for special events or individual family fun. From the minute you enter our building, you're transformed into a magical world of fun and excitement. Everyone's at
December 28th, 1992. What's meant to be a usual day at Spaceplex Arcade turns into one of shock, fear and mystery. A 9-year-old girl is reported missing to the local Long Island police. Where was she last seen? At the home of neon lights and laser tag, where children roam free and adults can have a rare opportunity to relax. But not today. At the same time, a man brings the young girl into a closet, down a tunnel and through a trap door. She's brought to a makeshift dungeon, tied up in chains and scared out of her mind. Her captor turns around to utter one chilling line. This is your home now. This is the story of the girl in the wall. Katie Beers was born in New York on December the 30th, 1982, and from the outset, she had a rough set of cards dealt to her. Her biological mother, Marilyn, was neglectful of Katie and her older brother. This meant that Katie found herself in the company of her two godparents, Linda and Sal Ingiliri, who weren't much of an improvement, to say the least. Described as living a Cinderella type of existence, Katie was forced to clean the bathrooms, cook dinners, and do the laundry. Basically, her sole purpose growing up was to be their servant. But the real abuse came from her godfather Sal, who would regularly sexually abuse Katie. All of this was unfortunately swept under the rug. Katie wasn't allowed to attend school either, meaning she didn't have any friends her age. She was born under a roof of misaligned adults, twisted and sick individuals who only prioritised themselves. Her only real friend was a man named John Esposito, or so she thought. John Esposito was nicknamed Big John by the local kids of Long Island. He was a member of the Big Brother and Big Sisters program of America, aimed at mentoring vulnerable kids who needed it most. But John was also holding a dark secret. In 1978, he pleaded guilty to the attempted abduction of a 7-year-old boy, narrowly avoiding prison time. What many didn't know was that in actuality, the Big Brother organization denied John from ever joining them. His dark sexual history got in the way. But the unassuming community of Long Island weren't aware of this. To them, Big John was a modest building contractor who spent his weekends hanging out with the boys in his garage. To Katie, Big John was an escape from her abuse-filled home. He often took her to Spaceplex, where she could forget about her worries and just be a kid for once. But on Monday, the 28th of December, 2 days before her 10th birthday, Katie's trip to Spaceplex proved to be a fateful one.
It was a man kidnapped me and he had to die you. Oh no, here he comes, I gotta go.
What you're hearing is the phone call Katie's aunt Linda received on the day she went missing. It was made from a phone booth outside of the front of Spaceplex. Alarm bells immediately start ringing from hearing this chilling audio and the local police swoop into action. Dominic Ferrone is the man in charge of leading this investigation, and he's immediately suspicious of this phone call. It's not believable to him in the slightest. Mainly, how would Katie be able to run away from Spaceplex and use a nearby payphone? It just raises more questions than it does answers. At first, Ferrone is suspicious of Katie's immediate family. Over 95% of kidnappings occur from close family members, but each have a strong alibi for the day she went missing. So he turns his attention to the last man to have seen Katie, Big John. After some digging, police uncover some startling information. There was no trace of Katie at Spaceplex that day she went missing, and the phone conversation wasn't a call at all. Rather, it was just a recording of Katie. And on top of this, whoever made this call to Linda tried to do so 19 times. The person who had abducted Katie had deliberately planned this all out. The police's background check on Big John reveals his perverted criminal history, and they find between 30 minutes and an hour of unaccounted for time on the day that Katie disappeared. As soon as the media got hold of this story, they immediately started shining the spotlight on John Esposito. The quest for Katie's kidnapper starts to slowly narrow down. Days pass by, and the Long Island community is on edge of what happened to poor Katie. Some even prepare for the worst, finding Katie Beers dead. The police eventually search Esposito's home, unfortunately finding nothing, but Dominic Ferrone still keeps a tight watch on Esposito. He isn't convinced that this so-called Big Brother is telling the complete truth. It has now been 17 days since Katie Beers went missing, The police and the media are weighing down on John Esposito. They are sure he knows something. Until finally, they get a breakthrough. John Esposito, under immense pressure, reveals something to his attorney. "I know where Katie is," he tells him. "She's behind the wall." The police uncover an elaborate maze underneath John's garage. Below a vinyl floor, a 7-foot drop, and through a cramped underground tunnel, the police discover an underground chamber, and in it is young Katie Beers. She had been there this whole time.
John had said, well, before we go to Spaceplex, let's go to 7-Eleven and get you a Slurpee. And then he's like, well, let's go to Toys R Us and I'll buy you a new video game. He brings me to Toys R Us. I pick out the Nintendo game, Home Alone. And he's there, he's like, well, you don't have a Nintendo at your house to play this on, do you? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, why don't we go to my house and we can play it for a little bit before we go to Spaceplex. So we went right to his house. Then his bedroom was this huge open room that had a humongous closet in it. It had a little mini fridge in there. It had one of those like hanging from the ceiling, like punching bag things. It had every single up-to-date gaming console available. On this day, I felt very uncomfortable being in his house by myself, being up in his bedroom, sitting on his bed. He sat on the bed behind me and he put his hand over my mouth, told me that he wasn't gonna hurt me, and then pulled me onto his lap. At that point, he then sexually assaulted me. He takes me and threw me into his closet that was in his office. The closet that was in his office had an unfinished wall, so there were just nails sticking out from the drywall, and I remember my back piercing them. So now I'm crying because I'm scared. I'm convulsing because I'm hurt. I see that he is maneuvering something from the floor.
Imprisoned in this 6x7 foot subterranean dungeon, Katie will spend the next 17 days imprisoned and abused by John Esposito. Left with a mouldy mattress and a makeshift toilet and a television set playing 24/7, Katie was forced to do whatever she could to make it through this terrifying ordeal. As the days went by, Katie closely followed her case on the news, noticing how the media was starting to press in on John Esposito. She knew that this was having an effect on John, becoming paranoid with all this attention. He was all over the place like a mad woman shit. Cleverly, Katie started to confront John and wear him down, asking him how she was going to go to school and how she wanted to get married one day. John reluctantly told Katie that she'd just marry him. Katie knew that he was starting to reach his breaking point. She also pretended to be sick, not eating any of the food that John would give to her, also in part in case it was poisoned. John even told Katie to pretend to play dead for the police, but she refused. He knew that it could result in her death. Thankfully, Katie was eventually rescued, and she now believes her rough childhood ironically gave her the mental strength to make it through her kidnapping. Her 17 days of terror was finally over. John Esposito was convicted of kidnapping on the 1st degree and sentenced to 15 years to life for his crimes. Police also placed Katie into foster care as soon as she was released from captivity, and her godfather Sal was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison for molesting Katie as well. Katie's never let her past impact her present-day life, and she now has a happy family of her own and is also a best-selling author. Her terrifying tale is one of true survival.